I've been playing video games a very, very, very long time. It dates all the way back to 1976 when I played APF TV Fun that my father brought home, which is a Pong clone, so we played a lot of Pong, and I was just 4 years old at the time. But I was beating my dad pretty consistently, and it was really from that point on that video games would be a part of my life, and that was, wow, that was 43 years ago this year that first happened. So the APF TV Fun was the first console that we had, and I put console in quotes because we really didn't change games out. They were just different versions of Pong. It wasn't until I spent time at my maternal grandmother's house and played with something called an Atari or an Atari 2600 or an Atari VCS that my experience with consoles really began. Playing games on her Atari was a pretty big deal for me, playing games like Asteroids, like Space Invaders, Pac-Man, E.T., that game that everyone hates but me, and playing games from a third party that no one had really heard of before the Atari, and I don't even know whether they existed, called Activision. Activision games, the first one that I remember playing was Pitfall, a game that you could go either right to left or left to right, and the idea was to try and get a perfect score within 20 minutes without losing all of your lives. So you had to jump across crocodiles, you had to swing across vines, you had to watch out for pits that you could fall into, you had to watch out for scorpions. There was no life bar. It was pretty much a one-hit death unless you ran into a log or something, which would take points away. So that was the first experience with Activision games that I had. Later on, games like River Raid or Chopper Command or Megamania or, Oink, and the list goes on. So I was always a fan of these Activision games, but never really saw them again much after my maternal grandmother had kind of packed up the Atari and I got older. That was, of course, until 2002 when Activision released something really cool for the PlayStation 2 called the Activision Anthology. This guy right here. This Activision Anthology has over 45 games on it, and these are some of the best and some of the lesser-known Activision released games or a couple of Imagic games that were released for the Atari 2600. This is a really, really cool collection, and I was so glad to find it sealed. There is the Activision Anthology sticker right at the top there. So I could open this up on camera and talk about it because Activision games for the Atari 2600 are quite good. And a lot of them still hold up, I think, to this day. Now, granted, the graphics are a little bit less than we're used to, and the gameplay may be a bit simpler, but at the same time, that simplicity, that ease of control where it's just moving up, down, left, right, diagonal, and one fire button makes the game so much easier to play. So when we turn this over, we get a look at some of the screens. You can see River Raid there, Pitfall is there, and they also show a screen from the bedroom that the game takes place in. So blast back to the 80s with Activision classic games for the Atari 2600. Get into the gaming groove with over 45 rad games from the Atari 2600 days, and rock out to hit tunes of the decade. Dude, there are only two words to describe a collection this cool. Totally awesome. And it's true. I love this collection. So you get Activision's best games from the Atari 2600, which are back for tons of nostalgic fun. You can play all of your favorites in wild and wacky enhanced gameplay modes. We'll get to that in a little bit. And there's a cool retro room navigation screen, which gives the full 80s experience. And they give some of the favorites for the Atari 2600 that are included. Games like Barnstorming, Boxing, Checkers, Chopper Command. That's a good game. Cosmic Commuter, Crackpots, a Dolphin, Dragster, Enduro. Enduro is a game that I played for the first time when I was staying over a friend's house. We did our first all-nighter. I was in 7th grade when that happened, and we played it, and I was up all night. I literally did play the game all night. Fishing Derby, Freeway, Grand Prix, Hero is another great game. Ice Hockey, a lot of fun. Kaboom, a little difficult to play without the paddle controllers, but again, we'll get to that probably when I talk about it. Keystone Capers is another one that I played a lot of. I never really got good at the game, but I played well enough to get to like the 3rd or 4th stage. Laser Blast, a game that you can play pretty much infinitely if you know what you're doing. Megamania, one of my favorite Activision games. Oink, Pitfall, Plaque Attack, Pressure Cooker, another game I played a lot of. Private Eye, River Raid. River Raid is awesome. River Raid 2, Sequest, another great game. Skiing, Skyjinx, Spider Fighter, another fun game. Stampede, Star Master, Tennis, and more. Plus, never before released on an Activision compilation, we've got Beam Rider, Bridge, Commando, Decathlon, another game that I played a lot of. Pitfall 2, Robot Tank, Space Shuttle, and more. Plus oddities including Kebabber, Thwacker, and more. There's also a hit 80s soundtrack here with Blondie, Missing Persons, Soft Cell, Twisted Sister, Wall of Voodoo, and more. And that's another cool thing about this. But before I talk more about the collection, let's go ahead and get this open. So we're going to get ahead and open this up. I don't need the scissors this time because this is pretty loosely sealed. So we're just going to take that right off there just like that. And we're going to take the seal off the top. Now, there was also a version of Activision Anthology for the Game Boy Advance, I believe, which is also pretty good, but it misses some of the features that the PS2 version has. This is the version that I recommend if you have a PS2 or a backwards compatible PS3. This one is great. It is a DVD-ROM, by the way, so if your PS2 is older and it doesn't play the blue-backed CD-ROM discs, fear not, because this will work. When we open this up, I just want to make sure the disc doesn't fall out. There's nothing really special in here, but the disc is kind of set up like a game. I like the font that's used, and I like the color scheme, that blue color scheme, and we've got the manual here, and we're going to take that out. The manual is not very deep. In fact, the manual is only 16 pages in length, but this is the manual here. Unfortunately, it's in black and white. There are some screens there, and it does list all of the games here. I'm not going to go into all of these. But some of the cool things in here that I can talk about, one of which is the fact that you can earn virtual iron-on patches, or patches that Activision would send out. And the way that those worked is for each game, there was a challenge in the instruction manual. It had to hit a certain score, or you had to beat a certain time. You had to meet a certain objective. If you were able to send a picture of your screen that showed you actually doing this into Activision, in return, they would send you a patch that you could keep, that you could iron on, or that you'd sew onto your jacket. You could do whatever you wanted with it, and those patches were really, really cool. Excuse me. So that's one of the cool things. You can unlock those in this game. There are also extra game modes you can unlock, and I want to see if they have some of those listed. So there's Classic. There's Cube mode, where a cube with the screens on it kind of spins in the center of the screen. So you have to kind of watch and see which face of the cube your game is on so you can keep track of it. It's a good test of your visual acuity. Ricochet, where the game is drawn onto a bouncing rectangle. Whirl, where the game screen will slowly rotate, which is a little creepy. Bungee, where the screen zooms in and out. Tilt-O-Vision, motion blur, breathing. Warped distortion, Starfield, where the background of the game becomes a mass of stars moving rapidly across the screen. That's pretty cool. Hyperspace, V-Hold, which is vertical hold. If you ever had an old CRT, and I'm talking like either a black and white one or one of the older color TVs, sometimes the picture would bounce, so the vertical hold would actually keep the picture in place. That's what V-Hold is. Multi-screen, disco, and cloud cover. So you got different gameplay modes. There are also things you could unlock in the game, such as commercials. You could see Jack Black, I think he was in the Pitfall commercial, or Phil Hartman was in the ice hockey commercial. So you can unlock those. The quality isn't great, but at least you can watch them, and that's pretty cool. So you can unlock those. And of course, the soundtrack is, to me at least, is really good. We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister is here. It's My Life by Talk Talk, which was covered by No Doubt sometime later. It's funny, we just talked about No Doubt in the last episode when we were talking about Frequency. Mexican Radio by Wall of Voodoo. Tainted Love by Soft Cell, a game that's also been redone, or a song that's been redone. Walking in LA by Missing Persons, a song that is criminally overlooked. The Tide is High by Blondie. Always Something There to Remind Me by Naked Eyes, one of my favorite songs from that era. Pulling Muscles from a Shell by Squeeze. So not Tempted, which is the one everyone knows, but still a pretty good song. Take on Me by Aha. Harden My Heart by Quarter Flash, No More Words by Berlin, and The Safety Dance from Men Without Hats. So this is a really cool compilation. If you don't have it for your PS2, I cannot recommend it enough. There are plenty of unlockables here. There are plenty of games to play, and this will test your reflexes. And if you haven't played these games before, they're really easy to learn but difficult to master, and that was the secret of games back in this era, whether it was for your Atari 2600 or whether you were playing the game in the arcade. It was simple enough to learn and to want to keep going back to, but difficult enough where you had to play it a few times and really practice to get good at them. So have you played this? Do you own this in your library? If you do, I'd love to hear from you, and whether you like it, whether this is one of your favorite compilations or not, I'll certainly tell you that it's one of mine. And if you have any of your own favorite compilation discs, what would they be? I'd love to hear from you on those, or just your thoughts on this in general, as this is one of my favorite compilations, and I do believe that it deserves a spot in every PlayStation 2 owner's library. So thanks for watching as always. I'm sorry about my voice starting to go a little bit, but until the next time, my friends, take care of yourselves and see you later.